In this video, I'm going to be showing you details on how to make meat pie, on how to make the short crust for meat pie, the filling, and the entire meat pie itself. So we're going to begin with the beef. First thing I did was to season the beef with some seasoning cube. I used just one cube for this beef, and I added some water. Then I added some rosemary. Then I allowed it to boil. When the beef was fully cooked, I took it out and strained the beef stock. I strained the beef stock to get this. Then I transferred the boiled beef into the blender and I blended it. This is my favorite way of processing beef for meat pie because you get a chewy texture. So to make the filling, I heated a pot of oil and I added some chopped onions. I seasoned it with this garlic, ginger, and onion seasoning powder, and I added some sliced cabbage. Now, traditionally, you're supposed to use potatoes for this, but I could not get potatoes at the time, so I just used cabbage instead. If you are able to get potatoes, you want to use potatoes for this recipe. You want to use potatoes at the same time I put the cabbage. So I stirred that, and so I added one seasoning cube and I stirred that and allowed it to cook for a while. Then I added the blended beef. But if you're using potatoes, you want to allow it to cook till the potatoes are done. And at this point, I added some grated carrots. Since carrots are very fragile, I just added it right before I turned out the right when I was about to turn on the heat. Then I added some slurry, which is just a combination of flour and water. About a tablespoon and a half of flour for this. So to make the short crust for the meat pie, add some flour in a bowl. Then I added baking powder. I added baking powder because I want this meat pie to rise and have a nice crack. Then I got this margarine. You can use butter if you have that. It was in the fridge for a while, so it was stiff. I had to open it up and cut it into cubes to use it. It's always a good idea to freeze the ingredients you're using for meat pie. So I added that to the flour and I used my hand to combine the flour and margarine. This is what it ended up looking like. Next thing I did was to beat a large egg. The measurements for the ingredients are in the description box below. I beat the egg till it was smooth. This is the beef stock from when I bought the beef. It was in the fridge, so it had cooled down at this point. I created a hole in the middle of the and added the egg. Now I left some egg because I'm going to use that as egg wash later on. I added some tablespoons of cold beef stock. I stir the mixture starting with a spoon before going in with my hands to properly knead the dough. After kneading for a while, the dough hadn't come together, so I decided to add some more beef stock. I tried kneading again, and this time it came together into a moldable dough. Now, you don't want your meat pie dough to be wet, you want it to just come together. Once it has come together like this, you can stop kneading. Next thing I did was to prep my baking tray. I simply used parchment paper on it. I want this meat pie to come out clean, so I'm just going to use parchment paper. I transferred the short crust to a clean surface. Then I cut it into 10 parts. Now, if you are doing this to sell, you would want to use a kitchen scale to measure them to make sure they are all equal. After that, I smoothen them into balls. I added some water into a cup with a silicone brush in it. Now it's time to roll out the short crust. I dusted the surface with a little bit of flour before rolling out the short crust. Then I transferred it to a then I transferred it to a meat pie mold. This is how to use a meat pie mold. Now I'm going to rub some water all over the dough, not just the edges, because I want the meat pie to have a very puffy look. So I was careful not to add too much filling because when you add too much filling in meat pie, it's going to burst while you are trying to mold it. This is how I used the mold to get that shape. I did not say I exhausted the 10 pieces of dough I cut out. Now, if you have some part of the mold that the flour hasn't covered, you can simply stretch the dough until it covers every part of the mold. Whenever you add too much filling, this part of the dough is going to burst open. Now, this is how you can roll out your meat pie if you do not have a mold. Simply take a small round bowl and cut out a round shape. Rub some water all over the dough before placing your filling in the middle. Now you're going to close that up. Make sure to press down it with your finger before sealing it with a fork. Now it's time for me to use some egg wash on the meat pie before transferring them. I combined evaporated milk and the remaining egg from earlier, and I rubbed it on the meat pie before placing them in the oven. This is how the meat pie turned out. You can see those beautiful marks. We've made it to the end of the video. Thanks for watching.